welcome to our nutrition video. I'm here with Keith, and Keith has put together some really great information for fueling for endurance and having a healthy body. So Keith, thank you so much for putting all this together.
Absolutely. So what I want to present today is just basic nutritional needs for runners. This isn't diet guidelines. I'm not a certified nutritionist or anything. I don't think Toni is either.
No.
But we are runners. We've been lifelong runners and have a lot of trial and error experience with our fueling and our nutrition. I just want to kind of talk about the things we need to add in because we're runners, because we're athletes, on top of our daily diet.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for putting all that together. So you had mentioned basic needs for nutrition for a runner. So what would some of those be?
So it's not a whole lot different than basic good nutrition for daily living. You want to focus on your macronutrients, your carbohydrates, your proteins, your fats, as well as vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, those kind of micronutrients we get from our food as well. The biggest difference is runners need more, and they need it in different varying percentages from those categories.
So then what are some things that a runner should do to make sure that they're getting in the proper amount of those nutrients?
So general guideline, like about 60 to 70% of your calories should come from carbohydrates if you're a runner.
Interesting.
The rest, 15 to 20%, should come from both protein and fat.
And so then, carbohydrates, that's, seems like a dirty word these days. So why is that percentage so high when it comes to like endurance running?
Yes, so when we think about carbohydrates, it is our body's preferred fuel choice for any type of intense training. So running is a very intense exercise. The body's going to be searching for those quick burning fuels, and carbohydrates are going to be the fastest fuel that our body can use. It's become kind of a dirty word because I feel like, a lot of carbohydrates, when you're not burning them, can lead to unhealthy weight gain, low energy, things like that. Because carbohydrates are meant to be burned fast, they will store pretty quickly as fat tissue and adipose tissue in our body once the liver is kind of topped off with the glucose and glycogen stores. So if you're not burning them, carbohydrates can cause that stuff.
Okay.
But as a runner, we are burning a ton more calories per day than somebody who's not exercising at all. So we actually need those carbohydrates to fuel those exercises. So
you mentioned carbohydrates, if you're not properly exercising, those could be fast burning fuel, but now is being stored as fat because activity levels not as high as it needs to be.
Correct.
And then we also talked a little bit about why carbohydrates are kind of looked at as the enemy or a dirty word. But then there's also like an emergence of diets called like keto diets and a low carbohydrate diet. So how could that be used, within running or when you're talking this conversation of carbs versus low carb?
Yeah, I think understanding what a keto diet does to your body or what a low carb diet does to your body is key to understanding, its use within running and why we still need the carbohydrates. A keto diet or a low carb diet, really the goal of it is to deplete all of your glycogen stores, all of your glucose stores, so that your body will start burning fat as fuel. The liver creates things called ketones that it can also use as energy when carbohydrates are not there, when glucose is not there, when glycogen is not there. So fat can be used as fuel too, but only at much lower intensities. So when you're thinking about like zone 1, maybe zone 2 training, your body can turn to those fat stores as fuel, but once you get up into zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, race paces, speed training, stuff like that, it's just not gonna sustain that exercise. So when we deplete our body totally of those carbohydrates, it will turn to fat. And for a general population, for somebody who's not running, that can definitely lead to weight loss and things like that. And all of the research that I've done about the keto diet especially, says there's definitely some benefits to it, but that it should be approved by your doctor. It should be monitored by a doctor to make sure that we're not overdoing it, going into things like ketoacidosis, which is actually a dangerous state for the body to be in. And if we're running while we're not having those energy stores in our body, we'll run into those lows and those funks where we're not feeling ourselves. We're not feeling good on runs anymore.
Interesting. Well, it's a great description, because I guess I've always heard about the benefits of how people feel when their lives have changed from it, but not as it applies to endurance running and that tired effect it could cause not having that. So,
right.
So carbs, the right carbs give you energy. What would be the right carb? Because, carb to me, I look at a potato chip as a carb, and I look at a banana as a carb, and a potato, and what's a good carb?
Yeah, I mean, there's two types of carbs. So there's simple carbohydrates, which is going to be like your glucose and fructose, sugar, basically.
Okay.
Just simple sugars. And then there's complex carbohydrates, which are going to be polysaccharides, longer chains of sugars that take a longer time to break down and stuff like that. So your complex carbs are going to be what you want to go to for your daily diet. If your daily diet is made up of mostly carbohydrates, you want it to be mostly complex carbohydrates. A list of good sources of complex carbohydrates are going to be your whole grains, oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, healthy cereals, whole grain pasta, fruits and vegetables. Good fruits are, apples, bananas, pears, anything like that. Vegetables, spinach and other leafy greens, Brussels sprouts, zucchini, squash, peppers, and then you've got things like legumes, beans, peas, lentils, things like that are going to be our bulk of our healthy carbohydrates and our complex carbohydrates. When we think of simple carbohydrates, those are sugars that are going to burn extremely quickly. So when we think of something that we can take during a run or right before a run to give us quick energy and fill in any gap we might have, that's where our simple sugars are going to be beneficial. So a GU, a Huma, those energy chews and gels are mostly simple carbohydrates that our body can tap into right away. It gets into our bloodstream fast, and we can use it fast, whereas complex carbohydrates need to be digested, but it's going to give us a really good base of glycogen, glucose store, so that we can sustain energy while we're running. If you're somebody who likes candy a lot, that's a simple carb. It's okay when you're running or when you're burning it right away, but that's something that's going to store really quickly as those fatty tissues that we talked about too. So
that's awesome, Keith. Well, thank you so much for going through that and talking through that today.
Absolutely.
Fat can be a part of a runner's diet. So what does it mean for a runner that burns fat for fuel?
So fat is another fuel source for our body. It's unlike carbohydrates, it's going to be slower to burn. So it's definitely more useful at zone 1, zone 2, really base efforts. And when we talk about zone 1 and zone 2, that's going to be a heart rate range that is pretty low on the scale. So when we think about how easy a zone 1 exercise is, it's going to be walking. It's going to be walking not even very briskly. If you hit a hill, you're going to be in zone 2. So things like walking, things like weight training, maybe water aerobics, things like that can be those really low zone efforts where you're burning fat as fuel because you're not at such high intensity that you need that quick burning fuel like carbohydrates. Fat also comes into play when our carbohydrates become depleted. So really long efforts like marathons and ultra marathons, the body has the ability to switch from carbohydrates once it's depleted into fat burning as fuel. So fat as fuel becomes more important for longer efforts and more endurance athletes and stuff like that. Fat's also really good because it's higher in calories, so it creates a fuller feeling. So having fat as part of our diet and adding it to our plate is going to make sure we don't overeat we become full a little bit quicker.
Great. So when we're talking about consuming fat and having that in your diet, what is a good one and what is bad fats?
Yeah, so most of our good fats are going to come from foods like nuts and seeds. There's a lot of healthy fats in vegetarian diets. And then when you think about animal fats, you're going to be looking at like salmon, fish, really lean meats, poultry, stuff like that. Anything that has like omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids in it are going to be what we use for good fat. There's also oils that are considered healthy fats. So avocado oil, coconut oil, flaxseed oil, sesame oil. Those are going to be things that we can use in our cooking and stuff like that to give our not only flavor to our food, but also adding healthy fats into our food. So if you're sauteing vegetables, saute it in olive oil or saute it in avocado oil, and you're adding a lot of good fat nutrients to your diet that way. And then when we think about unhealthy fats, you think about lard, bacon, sausage. There's also, heavy creams, whipped cream, ice cream, stuff like that. Mainly unhealthy fats. And then oils in that category too. You have palm oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil, which is going to be like your canola, your Crisco, stuff like that is going to be unhealthy fats. One's kind of a gray area, which is butter. Butter, like real butter, is better for you than margarine and butter substitutes, but it is definitely something we don't want to use in excess. So when you're cooking with something that calls for butter, go ahead and use real butter, but be careful as to how much you're putting in. If it calls for, a full stick of butter, try to do a half stick and maybe supplement it with coconut oil or something like that.
Yeah,
so you're
that's great.
Adding healthy fats to offset.
I always like thinking about good fats versus bad fats. I think a lot about when I go for a run after eating a terrible meal and how I feel terrible. Yes. Or then you go for a run the next morning after eating an amazing, healthy meal, healthy fats, and usually performance is a lot better. So there's probably a correlation between that.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And your unhealthy fats are going to sit in your stomach for a really long time. They're going to just turn into that like brick that you feel in your stomach. And also, make you go to the bathroom. Your morning doesn't start off great if you eat a Big Mac the night before. So we want to make sure we're giving our body those fats that make our muscles healthy, make our skin and our hair healthy and stuff like that. And those are going to be the fats that we want to use for fuel as well. Yeah. One really good bonus healthy fat is dark chocolate. So if you're going to eat something that's a really nice treat, dark chocolate, have a little bit each day. And, I find that's a good way to eat something sweet and dessert-like without piling on a lot of the unhealthy fats like heavy cream and things like that.
So that leaves us with one last macronutrient, and that's protein.
Yes.
So how important is protein in a runner's diet?
So protein's incredibly important, not as fuel, not as a performance nutrient, but as a nutrient that helps us repair our body. So we're putting our body through a lot when we're running and when we're exercising for running and doing all the things that we do to make sure that we're hitting our goals as a runner. So protein is going to be the key nutrient to making sure that all that training sticks and that our body has the building blocks to build back stronger after we deplete it through our exercise. So when we think about protein, we aren't using it during a run. We're not using it right before a run or anything like that. That's going to be something we want to consume right after our run so that we're kickstarting that recovery. We're giving our body a head start as far as repairing our muscles and getting ready to come back for the next training session.
What would happen if you did take protein during your run?
Again, that's going to be something that is very hard for your body to digest during a run.
So that's like,
it can turn into a gut bomb.
Okay, see, we have to spell that out.
Yes.
Some people think protein's so good, and I'm running long on Saturday.
Yep.
I'm gonna slam a protein drink before my run.
Yes. Save it for after. Save the protein drink for after. Okay. Beforehand, those simple carbohydrates, those goos. If you want to drink a sports drink or something beforehand, that's fine. But protein is not going to digest during a run. When we talk about what our body does during a run, there's less blood flow to our digestive system anyway. That's why it's hard to eat later in a race. The blood flow just isn't there. It's going to our legs, it's going to our hardworking muscles. So if we put something into our stomach that is slow to digest to begin with, it's just going to sit there. It's not going to give us any benefit.
Okay, so that's really cool, Keith, that you broke that down about what our digestive system's doing while we're running. We're utilizing our bodies as a vessel to accomplish a huge goal.
Yes.
Whatever that distance might be, from a 5K to a marathon or an ultramarathon. And that digestive system is slowing more and more with time as we continue to move. And how in tune we need to be with what we put in our body to fuel it to properly move for that amount of time.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It is. And, I've even had to adjust my intake of food during races and stuff like that to make sure that I'm getting the most out of it. I used to kind of wait until I felt like I was slowing down to start fueling.
Might be too late on that then.
Much, much too late.
Yeah.
And I've actually switched it to be, I take my nutrition early and often, so sometimes even more often than what's recommended by the packages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just because I know my stomach is working more properly then, I'm going to get more nutrients into my blood flow and stuff like that. Whereas later in the race, it's going to be harder to digest. I'm going to get that energy slower when I need it the most.
That's great.
And like I said, again, protein's just not going to be there for you. It's not a preferred fuel source for the body anyway. If the body can find carbohydrates or can find fat, it's not going to touch the protein as energy. So as long as your diet is balanced, protein's never going to be something that you burn while running. So it's always going to be after you're running, and you also want to take it with carbohydrates after your run too. So the recommended ratio from what I studied is 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 carbohydrates to protein. So protein to digest properly actually needs carbohydrate to help it get to where it needs to go. So carbohydrates actually help protein get into the body more efficiently so that our body can then synthesize it and repair muscles with it.
Interesting. That's great. That's wonderful. What are some foods or snacks, I love snacks, that would have be great with protein?
So one of my favorite snacks is going to be a hard-boiled egg on some wheat toast with salt and pepper and hot sauce. It's delicious. It's an easy protein source with that ratio of carbohydrates to protein. That's good for you. So eggs is a good protein source, one of my go-tos. Other animal sources, lean meat, seafood, poultry, things like that. Low-fat dairy products can be good for protein use as well. And then we do have our plant-based proteins as well. So your leafy greens have a lot of protein in them. Soy protein from edamame, soybeans, tofu, things like that. I like to actually get a pretty good mixture of like whey protein, plant-based proteins. Putting it all in a smoothie is a really good way to do it. And then there's a lot of products out there that are, kind of pre-concocted protein snacks. Tailwind makes a really good one. Huma makes a really good one. And I think when we think about a protein snack for runners, it's not like you have to load your body up with like 60 grams of protein. We're not bodybuilders. We're not trying to bulk up or anything like that. So a good 15 to 20 grams of protein that's high quality protein that your body can use right away is going to be what you're looking for that post-run snack.
Great, thank you. Okay, Keith, so that leaves us with micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. So how do we make sure we're getting enough of those in our diet too?
Yeah, the nice thing about this is we don't really have to be super nitpicky here, because if you're following a balanced diet already, chances are you're getting most of these vitamins, most of these minerals that your body needs already. But you know, there are times when we have gaps in these micronutrients, and that can affect our performance as well. So the best way to make sure we're getting a good vitamin and mineral intake is to eat a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. When you think about eating fruits and vegetables for vitamins and minerals, you want to think about eating all the different colors of fruits and vegetables. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So one way I make sure I'm getting enough of those from my diet and my real food intake is I love doing a stir fry. That I pick like 7 or 8 different vegetables, add maybe shrimp or chicken to it. And each one of those vegetables is going to be a different color. So if you're doing a stir fry and you put purple cabbage in there for your purple color, your green can be broccoli or peas or something like that. Orange carrots, you know, red, you can do radishes or red peppers or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you're picking fruits and vegetables from all those different color ranges, chances are you're getting enough of those vitamins and minerals from your daily diet. Another way I like to make sure I'm getting a lot more fruit intake is for like a dessert. Sometimes I'll do like a fruit parfait where it's like kiwi, strawberry, blueberries in like a low-fat Greek yogurt. It's tasty. It gives us a few different colors of those fruits to add in to our diet, and then you know, you're not having to think so much about each little vitamin that we're aiming for. You don't need to know all of them.
Yeah.
But just making sure you're eating all those different colors. Each one represents a different vitamin and mineral group.
Yeah, that's great. So what about supplementing it, like vitamins and minerals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, the best way to get the vitamins and minerals is through the food we eat, but there's restrictions for some people. So some people have food allergies to some of these foods that provide a lot of these nutrients and stuff like that. So, you know, taking a daily multivitamin is a good way to fill in a lot of gaps. There are some instances where certain conditions create certain vitamin deficiencies and stuff like that. If you're a vegan, there are some nutrients that are harder to get when we're vegan. And you know, zinc and iron and those like kind of heavy metal minerals that our body needs to operate properly, a lot of times will have to be supplemented, especially, you know, iron and zinc. But you know, definitely working with your doctor on that, not just going out there if you're a vegan and starting to take iron supplements, because you can definitely overdo it really easily too.
Okay.
Omega-3s are another one. You can get some omega-3s from certain vegetables and stuff like that, but the main source is going to be lean meat and seafood for those omega-3 fatty acids and stuff like that. You know, people that live in northern states like Michigan, we are pretty consistently low on vitamin D during the winter. So taking a vitamin D supplement during the winter can definitely help add to energy levels and stuff like that. You know, definitely have a conversation with your doctor if you're gonna take supplements. You know, even though most of the vitamins and minerals that we take in, if we don't need them, won't be absorbed. They'll just pass right through us. But we want to be careful, especially with like those fat-soluble vitamins and stuff like that, that we're not overdoing it or doing something that is detrimental to our body in the name of, you know, health.
Okay, that's a good tip. So always refer to your medical provider when it comes to what type of supplements your body might need for endurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you're definitely low on something, that's when you would talk to them about supplementing.
Fantastic, thank you. We've talked a lot about the nutrition, the food we're putting into our body. Let's talk about hydration real quick. What are some good guidelines, strategies for people that are looking to get a good amount of water in their bodies?
Yeah, so I mean, hydration is so important for runners especially. just thinking about the benefits of being hydrated. It helps maintain our body temperature, helps move blood and nutrients through our body more efficiently. It even helps us sleep better. It keeps our mind sharper and puts us in a better mood. But as far as specifically for performance, we're going to be sweating a lot more than somebody who doesn't exercise or run. So that typical 8 glasses of water per day, that's based on just basic daily needs for nutrition.
So that is somebody who is not doing any type of exercise.
Correct. That's just going to be the fluid loss through daily processes of our body. So when we talk about, wanting to hydrate more for our running activities, we have to think about what we're losing in sweat as well. So, our amount of water we need to take in throughout the day is based on how many calories we burn, plus the fluid loss through sweating, and things like going to the bathroom and stuff like that. So when we think about a lot more loss of that fluid through running, we need to supplement more and more with water. If you're running, less than an hour a day, supplementing with just water is going to be fine. If you're running more than an hour, those activities are going to require electrolytes as well. So that's when your sports drinks and stuff come into play. A good ratio of how much water to take in is, say you take your body weight, divide it by half. That's about how many ounces of water you should be drinking. Go a little bit more than that for a runner.
It's so interesting because all of our bodies are different. We all weigh different weights. So obviously we would require a different amount of water compared to just saying, you got to drink this every day.
Right.
I mean, it really helps dial it in a little more for our own composition.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
And then when you think about hydrating while you're running, my strategy is anytime I'm taking nutrition, I'm taking it with water or a sports drink. So every 20 to 30 minutes, usually at the beginning of a race, hydrating early and often, making sure I'm showing up to my race hydrated. So not just drinking a ton of water in the morning of the race, but weeks before the race, making sure my body is in a state of constantly being hydrated, so that all the other processes in the body are working properly.
That's great.
And then post-run dehydration.
Yeah.
Dehydration during a race has been shown not to be a huge factor, especially for faster runners. It's people that are out on the course for 5, 6, up to 8 hours that are more likely to need to deal with dehydration during a race, but post-run is going to be really important for dehydration as well. So we lose body weight by losing water through our race. If you weigh yourself after a race and you found that you've lost 2 or 3 pounds.
The 2 to 3 pounds wasn't because of the running.
No, it's water weight.
Okay.
You haven't burned that much muscle or fat in a race or anything like that.
So that's a scary thing. You need to put those 2 to 3 pounds of water back in you.
Yes. So keep hydrating after a race until that weight is stabilized again.
Okay.
It should equal your pre-run weight within a couple hours after your race.
That's a really important tip for us staying hydrated.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so we talked about a lot of the healthy stuff that we use for endurance. What are some bad things we should avoid?
So this is kind of the hard part because these are a lot of the things we really like to eat. These are a lot of things we consider treats and rewards and things that make us feel good, but they just don't love us back the same way. Start with things like fast food, the burgers and the greasy fried chicken sandwiches and stuff that you get from fast food restaurants are just full of unhealthy fats, trans fats, unhealthy carbohydrates. Those buns that you get from McDonald's and Burger King are just not nutrient dense at all, and have chemicals in them, things that are designed in a lab rather than natural food, natural meat and stuff like that. And then, other fatty processed meats, bacon, sausages, hot dogs, things like that we don't even know what part of the animal those meats come from. So we want to avoid those things.
Sure.
Also high in fat and preservatives and things like that. gosh, there's so much on this list. It's not fun to talk about, but you know, ice cream, all those really heavy creams and dairy products and stuff like that. We want to avoid those. Anything with a lot of added sugar. So again, like ice cream, jellies, fruit snacks, anything that's just processed sugar, added sugar, things like that we definitely want to avoid as well. When we think about those unhealthy carbs, again, those simple carbs. So like white bread, most pizza doughs, things like that are made with a lot of refined grains and a lot of those bad carbohydrates, as well as our pastries and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, you would think that those products are products that aren't breaking down cleanly in your system.
Right, yeah, it's kind of like, you know, you want to put good fuel in your machine to make it run smoother. Yeah. You don't want to be putting thick, greasy stuff into it to jam up the gears and stuff like that.
So if you put junk food in, you get junk performance.
Junk performance
so avoid junk.
Yes,
and we
absolutely.
just described some junk.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to do some cleaning out of the cupboards.
Yes. And a lot of artificial sweeteners too. Avoid the aspartame and stevia and stuff like that.
Okay.
And the last big one is going to be alcohol. Alcohol is something that can really sap our performance. You know, the post-run beer, the post-run drink is a big way to celebrate and reward yourself for a job well done. But just be warned that, you know, it can lead to some non-performance enhancing stuff. So alcohol is a big diuretic, so it's going to cause us to be chronically dehydrated if we drink too much of it. And you know, that dehydration can lead to rise in core temperature, it can lead to nausea when you're running, vomiting, raised heart rate, and just general fatigue overall. So that celebratory beer after a really hard run, no problem with that. But if it becomes a habit after every run that you reward yourself with something like that, it can really lead to some detrimental performance things.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think that it's a way of gathering.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, junk food as well as alcohol in moderation is okay. We're not saying like completely axe it, but if you even think that if alcohol is a regular part of somebody's everyday life, their body is always in constant dehydration as they're trying to better their body. It's something to really watch out for is that regular alcohol intake. Yeah,
it's definitely working against all the other healthy habits that you're trying to put into your body. And like you were saying, those things where we're gathering for a burger and a beer after a group run or something like that, if that's the main thing you enjoy about a group run and it keeps you coming, it keeps you running, and it keeps you doing all the other healthy things, go for it. Yeah. Just in moderation. And try to watch out for your health while you're doing those things too.
That's great. Awesome.
So, yeah.
Very nice. So we have a couple questions. Keith went on Team Running Lab, and in preparation for this talk was, what are some questions you have about general nutrition and fueling for performance? And so this is a great list. You want to start off with the first one?
Yeah, let's go through them.
Yeah, the first one is, am I supposed to be snacking at some point during the run?
So, short answer is probably yes. If you're feeling fatigue later in runs, if you're feeling worn out after a few miles, then loading some carbohydrates into your body to give it more energy to tap into mid-run is going to make a big difference. So, general rules is anything over an hour is going to deplete your glycogen store and your carbohydrate store to the point where it doesn't have much left in the tank to keep fueling. So with those goos, with your energy gels and chews and stuff like that, or if you're using real food, every 45 minutes or so during activities that last longer than an hour, you should be taking in something to fuel your body. That's great. That kind of has me skip to a different question in our list. Yeah. One was, is there such a thing as over-fueling with chews and gels during a run? Yes, okay. I would say definitely. And it's a mistake I've made at races and stuff like that. So when we go back to thinking of how our body works when we're running and doing vigorous exercise, we start talking about how our digestive system kind of starts shutting down. So
yeah,
something that's really easy to digest and tap into for fuel at the beginning might not be at the end. So if you're continually putting stuff in your body when you're feeling nauseous, when you're feeling full, when your body's just not taking it in fast enough, you tend to overfuel and hurt your performance just by having too much in your stomach that your stomach's then going to try to digest when it doesn't have the blood flow.
That sounds pretty harsh.
Yes.
Yeah.
That can create a big gut bomb, and you can really, really end your performance by getting nauseous and throwing up the rest of the time you're out there.
So what's the best way for someone to figure out what works best for them?
Experimenting during training. Definitely finding what fuel sits best with your body, what works best with your stomach, what makes you feel energetic, and then using that same stuff on race day. So there's a ton of products out there. You know, some people love goo, some people get an upset stomach with goo, so they have to switch to something else. Some people have dietary restrictions. Anybody who has celiacs that is totally gluten-free. There's definitely a lot of options out there for you, but you just have to be careful with what it is. And if you are training with something and you're feeling nauseous pretty consistently, it's time to switch to something else.
Okay, so that means what they're using is not working properly.
Exactly. So when you think of, like, I like to compare GU and Puma a lot because GU is the leading brand. It has a lot of those simple carb ingredients in it that our body can really tap into and use really quickly. But I also hear from a lot of people that makes them nauseous or doesn't sit well with them. Whereas Huma is more of a natural ingredient. Energy comes from powdered chia seeds, so it tends to sit better with some people's stomachs and give them a better energy profile. It makes them feel like the energy is cleaning or burning cleaner and working better for them.
Great. That's incredible. So you just highlighted about overfueling and what could happen from a digestive standpoint. How do you know if you're not fueling enough?
Yeah, so our body's pretty good at giving us signs of when we need more energy. Cramps, tired legs, rumbling stomach obviously would be one, but especially if you're getting dizzy, if you're having mid-run crashes, if you've been training well and then you get to your race day, it's a marathon and you're bonking at like mile 17 when there's still a lot to go, probably needed to fuel a lot more, a lot earlier.
Can you save yourself at that point? Like, that's scary. Like, I've trained for 16 weeks and mile 17, my body literally can't move.
Yeah.
How do I save myself? How do I come back from that?
So definitely lower the intensity of your run while you intake more nutrients.
Lower the intensity. So that means to
run slower, walk, stop at the aid stations, take your time there so that you're putting enough in your body to start fueling it. You can kind of kick your system back on, but it's really hard at that point. If you haven't fueled enough, if your dinner the night before wasn't healthy or if it wasn't enough for you, trying to, fill in those gaps after you've already crashed is going to be hard. So that's, in my instances, when that's happened, that's when I go to my plan B or my goal B or goal C even at some points where, you know what, I'm not hitting my mark today, but I'm going to finish this thing. Slowing down and really making sure you're taking in a lot of nutrients and definitely a lot of water at that point too, a lot of hydration once you start crashing too.
That's a great point. One thing that I used to do, I read somewhere, was train your stomach and sabotage it sometimes when you're training. Like, kind of as an emergency response of knowing what to do when things go bad. And so, one night I would eat, nachos for dinner, just like an appetizer of nachos, which is horrible when you go to do a long run. And my run would be horrendous. But then the whole goal is to understand your body and how it works when you eat certain things the night before and during the run and how to fix it while on the go. And if you don't know how to fix it, it can be very scary in the middle of a race and not knowing you will come back out of it. You just have to take care of yourself. Feed it, hydrate it, and adjust your pace at some point.
Yes, and I think what you're talking about with those like those garbage runs where you purposely eat bad, knowing that you are an ultramarathoner, there's a huge mental aspect to that too.
Sure.
So maybe you're training yourself mentally to prepare for, gosh, what happens if I feel horrible during my race? How am I still gonna push through it? And there's a mental game there too. But not great for fueling, so those runs probably weren't that fun.
They were not fun, but they worked.
Yes.
And on race day, when things went wrong, I knew how to get out of it.
Yes.
And you will always make it out.
Yep.
Yep. Awesome. So then, what about, we talked about some other options. You've talked about Huma, you've talked about goo. What about any liquid options? If somebody doesn't like the texture of gels, or even chewing a chew, is there something else out there that could be good?
Yeah, so I mean, your powders that dissolve in water and stuff like that, if you can put all your nutrition into just one bottle and carry it with you, it can be more palatable. It can be easier to access. It's something that you can sip along the way. You don't have to take 100 calories at once or anything like that. Tailwind's a great option for like a full nutrition spectrum. So it's going to be your hydration, your energy, your electrolytes all in one bottle. Scratch Labs makes a good one. And then UCAN is another one to think about if you're going with that liquid nutrition. It's a slower burning starch, so it's less spiky, less of a high, but it also burns slowly and gives you just a steady energy along the way, and I've known people to use that.
That's interesting. That description of UCAN is really similar to the description you talked about with burning fat for fuel in Zone 1 and Zone 2.
Yep.
I can assume that's probably very similar to that energy level.
Similar, but it's almost more like the complex carbs. So the complex carbs are going to be that starchy energy profile that are going to burn slower. So if you're putting UCAN into your body, it is still a type of carbohydrate. It's just not the same as the fast-acting glucose and energy gels and stuff that we are really used to using for energy.
Yeah, that's a great description of that. All right, Keith, so we talked about a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of sugar, a lot of fast-burning fuel and slow sustained fuel sources. Diabetics have to pay a lot of attention to what they're consuming and their sugar levels. So what's a recommendation there for an endurance athlete with diabetes?
Yeah, so this was one of the first questions that popped up when I posted this on Facebook, was what are tips for runners with diabetes? And something I'm not familiar with myself, so I had to do a lot of research on this. Most of it comes from Johns Hopkins and Harvard University, so I didn't want to make this stuff up at all. I didn't want to quote anything wrong here or anything like that. So one of the bonuses I found out is that running does help improve the body's sensitivity to insulin, so it's going to help diabetics use the insulin that they can produce or the insulin that they take in, and help them be healthier. So just like anybody else, running is good for them. But the big thing is that they want to avoid those blood sugar crashes. They want to avoid the hypo lows that they're at risk for. And the longer the distance is, the more they're at risk for that blood sugar crash. So you definitely want to be making sure that you're checking your blood sugar levels before each run, especially long runs. You want to make sure they're in that mid-range. Even a little bit high is okay, but if your blood sugar is low to begin with, they say don't run for at least 2 to 3 hours. You may have to take some fast-acting insulin or some sort of supplement to get that blood sugar back up to healthy before you go out and risk that blood sugar dropping even lower. Like I said, the long runs pose a little bit of more of a challenge because you need to start at a medium or a high level, and you need to definitely keep that sugar coming. So glucose tablets or energy gels or things like that can keep the nutrient levels up. Kind of the same recommendation as for normal runners, taking that glucose every 5 to 6 miles or every 35 to 45 minutes or so to keep everything high. And then hydration is essential. So too much liquid will make it hard to digest stuff, so you want to kind of match your fluid intake for what you're using nutrition-wise. So hydrating a little bit more often than what you see most people doing, and smaller amounts. So taking in
sips for thirst.
4 to 5 ounces every 15 to 20 minutes, rather than making it 5 miles and then taking in a bunch all at once.
So this runner probably would be better off with a fuel belt, a handheld, a hydration pack, just to ensure that hydration is happening more regularly.
Yes,
a good reminder.
Absolutely. And the other thing I found out from my research was that, work with your doctor on your insulin intake. They may have to adjust it based on your running habits. So if you're eating larger meals to make sure that you have the blood sugar to support your run, they may want to down your dose of insulin for before those long runs and stuff like that. So work closely with your doctor, tell them what you're up to, and tell them that this is your goal, and make sure that it's going to be healthy for you, and make sure that you're working with them to make sure it's safe for you to do all that stuff. But just like anybody else, running's great for you as long as you're doing it safely.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Keith, for doing all of this work and setting this up, doing all the research. I think when it comes to an endurance runner, or even an endurance walker or hiker, the proper nutrition, hydration, and fueling is key to having a successful performance.
Absolutely, 100%.
So thank you for getting all this stuff.
Of course, I was excited to do it.